Welcome to the Payroll Podcast, the show that explores the latest insights and innovations in the world of payroll. Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. My name is Nick Day, CEO at JGA Recruitment Group, and we are specialist payroll recruiters. Now, today I'm joined by Megan Knab, who is co-founder and CEO of Franklin. Now, you may or may not have heard of Franklin, but interestingly, they are a tax-compliant hybrid cash and crypto payroll service that they really help enable clients to pay their employees in both cash and crypto. Now, with a background in accounting and product management, Megan has held leadership positions at Web3 native firms since 2016. In fact, I would say she is a crypto expert. She's certainly a crypto accountant. She's got experience working with the likes of ConsenSys and DriveWealth, and most recently Serotonin, a Web3 marketing firm and product studio, where Megan served as the VP of Finance. As co-founder of Franklin, though, she believes she's found a solution for helping clients who have employees who want to inject crypto into their payrolls. With the burden of administering payroll complex as it is, particularly in relation to processing crypto payments, I wanted to invite Megan onto the show today to basically bring us all up to speed in the world of crypto payroll payments, the future of payroll, of course, and ultimately for me, just to find out more. So Megan, welcome to the Payroll Podcast. How are you feeling today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me and for such a great, thorough introduction.
No, it's been my pleasure. And I should mention as well, obviously you do offer a great service to US customers, but it's a global solution as well. So for those that do listen from, we've got listeners all over Europe and in the US. For those that are listening and want to engage with a crypto-based solution, it's worth mentioning it's a global solution that you provide. Before we jump into that though, let me just start with my first question. I ask all of my guests, what does the word payroll mean to you?
Yeah, so I think, there are a couple layers of like how we could double click into what payroll is. But, what most people think about when they think about payroll is this sort of normal, regular back office operation that companies undertake to make sure that their staff is compensated properly. And it's that execution, operational sort of like workflow. But, I think that payroll, sometimes you think about like sitting in a back office in a dark sort of like basement of a corporate back office. And really what we are trying to do at Franklin is sort of bring to the front some of how important these sort of back office operations are for companies. Payroll is one of the most common, also one of the most complex financial operations that any company undertakes on a regular basis. And we think it's really important, and it doesn't deserve to be shoved into this like dark corner of our minds or our offices. It should be something that we think about as at the forefront of finance. And that's what we're trying to do at Franklin, is take a little bit more of an innovative approach and help companies operate their businesses in a more interesting way and be able to compensate their staffs in a more interesting way.
Fabulous. And what I love is it's pushing the needle here and what payroll can do when we think about how it can relate to broader objectives. So, for example, in relation to talent, attraction, and retention, right? I know not everyone necessarily wants to be paid in crypto yet. Some people don't even quite understand what it's all about, and we'll certainly get into that. But for those that do, for those that are already very much engaged in the world of cryptocurrencies, this could be the difference between whether they choose one employer over another. If I can be paid in my chosen, payment format, which might be cash and crypto, over another that can't provide that service, that could potentially be the difference. And that's why I think really they're the kind of services that thrust payroll into the limelight. They're the kind of services that really show the importance that payroll can have on how an employee feels at work. So I think it's a fantastic example that you gave there. So I'm really glad I asked the question. Let's jump into just to explain a little more what cryptocurrencies are, why they're important in the payroll industry in particular. I know there's going to be lots of questions that people are thinking about in relation to the risks, which is what we always hear about in the mainstream news, and we'll get to that. But I wonder if you can just tell us what are cryptocurrencies?
Sure. So cryptocurrencies are digital assets that sit on top of blockchains. So digital ledger solutions. Many of the cryptocurrencies that we're familiar with sit on public blockchains. So these are essentially decentralized networks that run off of a bunch of different sort of like computing powers, and they're open source. So it's really open source money. So, we think there's a lot of sort of, I think, association with cryptocurrencies around speculative trading assets. So certainly of these dog coins that have been, going to the moon, so to speak. that is certainly a part of what the cryptocurrency market is composed of. And it has a specific sort of target market in speculative traders. But there's a lot more to the world of cryptocurrency. And, our sort of thesis at Franklin is there are a lot of ways that this kind of digital asset technology can benefit companies. So as you mentioned before, there are these sort of more Web3 native or Web3 aligned companies who may have a multi-currency balance sheet where they're holding cash, they're holding stable coins. They may have, crypto native workers that want to be compensated in these kinds of assets. We at Franklin, for example, have one kind of user segment of contractors want exposure to the US dollar, and a stable coin is actually the most efficient way to give them access to that kind of currency. Sure. But for companies outside of the blockchain Web3 industry, cryptocurrencies can also sit under the hood to just sort of create more operational efficiencies in how they move money around, and that's also something that we think about a bit at Franklin. That was a long-winded answer to what is cryptocurrency. It's an open source digital asset sitting on top of a blockchain.
Super. And one thing that immediately springs to mind, and I don't know if this is accurate, it's not my wheelhouse here, which is why I've got you on the show to explain it to our listeners. But something that popped to mind, we've got a number of global payroll leaders here that are paying employees in hundreds and hundreds of different countries. And some of those, you mentioned there, but stable coin, some of those have very unstable currencies. And actually, the last thing they want to do is be paid in the local currency that they may be based in. Now, we often hear in the media that actually crypto is unstable. It can be volatile, but actually in comparison to what their own currencies, it may actually be a haven of stability. Is that something that, would that be an option for me if I was based in one of those countries? Could that be a way of stabilizing the way that I'm paid potentially?
Yeah, potentially if you're getting paid in stable coins, specifically USD peg stable coins, there are a number of issuers in the United States that are regulated financial institutions that issue stable coins. Some of the employers on our platform, particularly we think about Argentina, where there is this amazing sort of software developer population that are dealing with a very serious macroeconomic issue where their currency is hyperinflated. And for them, being able to receive exposure to the US dollar and payment for their services is very attractive and has been something that employers on our platform think is a competitive advantage to be able to compensate their staff that way. But getting back to, there are lots of unstable cryptocurrencies too. And so how do we think about that? There are certainly a lot of rules about how workers in the United States and outside of the United States can be compensated. And so we look at what those rules are. And for the more speculative assets or more, sort of like investment assets, we can think about that at a different level of compensation other than your W-2 or 1099 wages, right? Perhaps it's a bonus, perhaps it's sort of like added sort of incentivization. And those are kinds of compensation, options that should be available to employers that really are not, the technology just really hasn't been there with a lot of legacy payroll providers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And ultimately, that's what employees are looking for, right? It's choice, whether that's in the way that we're paid or the way that whether we work from home or in the office or whether it's the hours we work, it doesn't matter. It's choice that really improves the employee experience. So I love the fact that we can, again, it links back to the service payroll provide can really help that employee experience piece. Just to, before we jump into, I guess, the benefits, because I think there are a number here we're going to run through during the course of today's show. What are the risks? What are the things we should be aware of when we think about cryptocurrency, and particularly in relation to crypto from a payroll perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about the crypto native crowd, there are certainly many lessons that we should be looking to from the past about how some projects decided to incentivize their staff. So as an example, if you're planning to do a token launch, incentivizing or paying your staff 100% in that token is obviously not a good idea, right? Because we live in the real world. There are labor laws about how you should pay your staff, which usually means it needs to be in a fiat pegged or fiat equivalent currency. So that's one that I would say. I think that, the way we think about payroll at Franklin is that it should be a spectrum, and that's why it's so important for us to also be providing these sort of more standard, kind of like plain vanilla payroll services where you can be paying your staff 100% in cash, 100% in stablecoins or other crypto, or some mix of both on that kind of spectrum. And it really depends on, what does the company's balance sheet look like and what is the appetite of their workers.
Okay, perfect. And previously, we're going back a couple of years now, and it's interesting to see how the technology, how fast things have rapidly changed. But I did a show on the blockchain with Anita Letting some time ago, and she talked about blockchain potentially having a number of uses in the world of payroll. I'm not sure how that's developed in the 2 years since that podcast was launched, but it'd be great if you could, I guess, if I ask you, where are we with the blockchain? Can the blockchain still have a positive impact on the payroll industry? Do you still see it coming into and infiltrating the payroll industry further?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, speaking specifically to the United States use case, but I think it's sort of applicable outside, just as like a general sort of like banking limitations, like the limitations of financial rails in our current sort of like financial system. Most payroll companies in the US, they will hold cash for up to 10 business days. And so there's a timing mismatch between when funds from a company's operations account are debited to when it's actually deposited into their workers' bank accounts. And that can be a long time, especially for smaller sort of employers that want to be matching the cash inflows with their cash outflows as best they can. I think that for us, one of the benefits of public blockchain technology, especially on Ethereum and the layer 2s around Ethereum, is that you can have an almost instant settlement time of assets. So, ways that traditional sort of like, regular cash-based, USD-based payroll services work is they will offer it as a kind of, enhanced benefit where they'll create a real-time or faster payroll settlement time, but it's much more expensive. So they will upcharge you on the sort of like costs of it. And then what you're essentially doing is entering into a kind of complex loan agreement with them or their subsidiaries, their banking partners, where they're essentially fronting you cash and you're almost factoring in some ways your payroll run.
Makes sense.
With cryptocurrencies and particularly with stablecoins, we can just move money quite a bit faster from parties that go from A to B or A to B to C to D. So when we think about, one of the innovations of like this kind of technology that's been around for the past 10 years or so, it's almost, forgotten that remittances and just the pure movement of having a sort of peer-to-peer kind of transaction was why a lot of these systems were developed. And we haven't seen them sort of come to fruition as much at scale, certainly like at an enterprise level. We've seen a lot of experimentation. We've seen some of these side projects with speculative traders, right, that give the industry kind of a scary connotation. But that kind of core use case is something that we're really trying to apply and make scalable at an enterprise level in our sort of niche of the world, which is payroll.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, it's an exciting niche for those that listen to this show. So that's a positive thing to hear. Obviously, one thing that the listeners, I'm sure, will be wondering now is, well, what about the tax compliance issues here? Now, I don't know how far we've moved on, whether it's globally, governments are taking note now, and there's a complex, because one of the hardest things about payroll, of course, is the understanding of compliance and making sure taxes are paid correctly when they're running a payroll. So do you see tax compliance changing in the next few years as digital assets become more pronounced in the current financial ecosystem as we see it at the moment?
Yeah, I do think that it's going to change. Being now where we are in 2023 is actually like a much nicer time to be than where we were a couple of years ago when I got started in this industry, because we do actually have some guidance from different regulatory authorities around the world. Speaking to the US use case, just because that's where we're based, what we have to look at we look at like the IRS rules. So what are the requirements if you're paying in non-stable assets, making sure that we have the proper reporting and the withholdings for capital gain loss, and making sure that all of those sort of journal entries flow through to your general ledger properly. But then we also have another layer of, in the United States and in many European countries, there are sort of jurisdictional rules by state, by country, by city, on how you should be treating your workers and how you should be paying them according to the rules of that certain like locality. And so we have to look at all of that, and we bake it into our software to make sure that we're arming our companies with the best possible sort of payroll experience,
Sure.
so that they can make sure that all of their boxes are checked.
Is that a pretty simple thing to ship? I don't know. Maybe I should, but I'm not sure what the current HMRC guideline is for the UK regulatory process or on compliance for crypto payments. But if they were to change in the UK and one of your clients was a global payroll that had a UK employee base and they wanted to be paid in crypto assets, is it very easy? Is it a relatively simple process to bring in that legislation to make sure things are done compliantly or not? How challenging is that?
Well, there's certainly some special sauce of what we do at Franklin to make sure that we're staying ahead of all of the sort of like,
Right.
to separate regimes. Interestingly, in the United States, there are, something like over 400 different sort of like tax jurisdictions you have to look at for creating a national
Yeah,
payroll
because every state is
experience.
different, isn't it? I think Pennsylvania has 200 and something different types of legislation alone. I think I remember them saying. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And there are very few providers of that information. There are maybe two or three that offer these sort of like centralized tax databases. And I was talking with one of them recently, and they said that in the state of Pennsylvania specifically, which is one of the most complex
Yeah.
jurisdictions in the US to employ somebody, they have a team of, just a couple of people that call different cities within Pennsylvania to find out if their tax rates have been updated, because that's the only way to find out, for whatever reason. And so
Wow.
there's clearly an issue, right, with
Yeah, for sure.
how
It
this
sounds that
data
way.
is aggregated.
Yeah.
And for any company, right, no company that's in business, creating widgets or building software, right, these are not the level of issues that you can get into practically when operating your company. And so we try to make that easy. I think that for like operationally for companies that have, are paying in crypto assets and a rule changes, that is something that, is not exactly like a flick of a switch, right? But is possible to update. And that's been our thesis with building our product, is making sure that we have all the sort of expected connections to traditional banking rails as well as the crypto part of it. And on the USD or the fiat side, we also look to make that experience better, right? So we do 2-day ACH settlement because we have great banking partners. We're able to move money in cash faster than many of our competitors, and we don't really charge a premium for that kind of service.
Nice. Okay, that's great. So again, listen to this. We've gone through, for example, one of the benefits from my perspective is improving the employee experience, giving employees more choice about how they get paid is a good thing, gives them more empowerment, it gives people more reasons to stay or to join a business. But if we take it to a sort of a recruitment 101 example,
Yeah.
what would be the key concerns that perhaps a payroll manager may want to consider if they want to start paying people in crypto? And what are the benefits? So kind of one side concerns, one side benefits, so that people can get a bit of an overview on what paying people in crypto could really bring to their organization if they want to start engage this kind of offering for their employees.
Yeah, so I think that paying people in crypto is not something for the faint of heart, right? And it may not be something that every company decides is right for their staff if they don't
Sure.
already have crypto on their balance sheet. There are some complex issues that occur when holding crypto on the balance sheet, in that you don't have exactly the same kind of customer experience that you have with crypto than you do with cash. So you may choose to self-custody your crypto. That is a different kind of, you need a sort of set of different financial controls than you would for bank accounts. You may need to have exchange accounts that will custody your funds for you. That's sort of a more standard, like you're going through a sort of banking due diligence process, right? And there are different sort of requirements there depending on which exchange you go with, which amount, how
Sure.
much crypto you're holding, on how quickly you can move money on and off of those service providers. So I think that, crypto as a form of pure payments is something that I think sits with companies that are already sort of aligned to the Web3 industry. So maybe you're accepting payment in stablecoins. You want to use those assets on your balance sheet to pay your stuff. That makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
as you said, crypto can be something that is, a sort of broader sort of incentivization situation. So maybe you want to offer it as part of your employee benefits package, where, one of the partnerships that we have is with a crypto-enabled 401k provider. So they offer you, the same kind of like retirement benefits that you would have, but as part of that portfolio, you're also getting tax advantage Bitcoin and ETH.
Of course.
Perhaps you want to be distributing crypto in some other sort of way as a bonus or as part of an equity program, things like that. Those are all like really interesting, innovative ways. And there are a bunch of studies done, particularly on younger generations. So the younger sort of like spectrum of millennials as well as Gen Z, they want exposure to these kinds of assets to be able to earn crypto as opposed to just trade it and play with it at like you would sort of gambling in Vegas or something like that.
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing that as well. It's adjusting to what the needs are of the workforce that's coming through. But actually, it's been quite surprising for me just how many businesses do hold some kind of crypto on their balance sheet. It's way more common than I probably thought. So I don't know if there are PR managers listening to this now, but they may or may not be aware that perhaps their business already holds some form of crypto. And if they do, this might be something they want to consider if they're already trading in those kind of assets, as you say. I mentioned, as I mentioned, I read something on your website and your blog where you're talking about you're now offering automated tax reporting in crypto. What does that mean? How does that work?
Yeah, so the tax reporting it's a couple different levels. So the tax reporting, it's sort of two-sided, right? So the employee needs to understand what their tax liabilities are based off of the currencies that they've gotten paid in. We can handle all of that, and we'll also issue all of the sort of standard forms required for that. So in the US, it's W-2s and 1099s. And then there's a whole sort of level of corporate reporting that's also required. So you have some financial reporting just from moving money around. So statements of crypto flows. So, debiting and crediting your stablecoin accounts or your other crypto accounts, as well as being able to tag the transactions that are going out for payroll and push those as journal entries into your sort of general ledger accounting system. And then, the sort of like corporate tax side of it. So if you have gains and losses associated with the assets on your balance sheet, will also help with those kinds of calculations.
Okay, that's really handy. So one question I have, and I mentioned it earlier with the volatility piece, we know that the markets can change quite a lot, more so in the crypto markets, as I understand it, to the more stable markets like the FTSE over here, or whatever it might be. So how do we navigate that? How do we deal with changing markets, or do we need to?
Yeah, what I was thinking about this when you were talking about how a lot of companies do actually surprisingly have crypto on their balance sheet. I think about, the sort of latest bull run, as we call it in crypto, of around right when the pandemic started and the stock markets were going off the charts. I was working at an equities trading desk at that time, DriveWealth, and was working on their data team, and you could just see like the sort of like enthusiasm is the right word to say. And that was a sort of onboarding point for a lot of companies to say, maybe we should have some diversification and exposure to other kinds of assets outside of equities.
Because it used to be gold, didn't it? You'd come out of the markets and jump into gold, and everyone didn't go gold this time. They all went into the crypto, or seemed to go into the crypto markets.
Digital gold, perhaps. Gold. And certainly like we've seen some pretty wild situations in the bond markets in the United States and in at least Switzerland that I'm aware of in the European market, where banks had these sort of mismatched sort of assets on their balance sheet of having long-term loan books that they weren't able to cash out in the event of a bank run, like we saw with Silicon Valley Bank, at least here in the US.
Yeah, sure.
So there's some, it feels to me a little bit, having been operating a company in the Web3 industry for the past year, that we're sort of always dodging bullets, So we saw some pretty spectacular exchange blowups like FTX. We see Bittrex in the United States exiting this market. And then we also see it on the traditional finance side, with the banking crisis that seems to be ongoing. The earnings call of First Republic Bank this week, down 20%. We'll see what happens there. I think it's unrealistic to be running a company in this kind of macro environment and just have all the trains run on time like perhaps they used to. we are just in a more sort of volatile financial market, and we have to be prepared for that. One of the things that we saw actually when Silicon Valley Bank was in distress a couple weeks ago, feels like a year ago, but just a couple weeks ago, was payroll companies not being able to actually execute payments because their wires were stuck with Silicon Valley Bank. And in that case, you know, it was unfortunately like a message that we tried to spread a little bit, where it's actually a responsible operational activity to have a multi-currency payroll solution. We were able to help companies that were afraid that their staff wouldn't get paid on time to be able to execute payroll in stablecoins, just because of a crisis that sort of seemed to manifest itself almost overnight. So, you know, it's wild out there. It's a wild time to be running a business, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, I can concur with that. And actually, what you just did there is give another example of having options, right? Having multiple currency options, that if you need to pay someone differently, you've got an out. Something that was quite interesting, because a lot of people, we think, we're listening to this, and if they're not in this world, it might all be sort of, I don't know, hard to understand. Right. So when I read on your site as well, that you actually you integrate with some very, very well known common accounting platforms, it brings it all home. It's not actually like woo thinking that we're miles away. You actually integrate with some really, really big accounting platforms. The companies did want to integrate this. It's not as complex as perhaps it might first seem.
No, you know, I think that for a lot of financial operators out there who have worked moving money around in the back office of you know, in an accounting office of like a Wall Street firm like I used to, or entrepreneurs that are starting up companies that now see, you know, the complexity of moving money around, you know, public blockchains and crypto actually are a very logical next step in the progression of how money should move. We should be able to move money faster, cheaper, with fewer intermediaries. But the sort of reality is that, like, you know, there's a little bit of a tough user experience, right? There's a little bit of a mental shift you have to make, because it's not like you have a bank account. Now you have a wallet, and that wallet can sit in your browser. And so I think that it takes time to change sort of norms, you know, of like just generally how people expect to interact with their financial assets. And then, you know, an even bigger step to think about how operators want to change how they operate their companies. And part of that is also looking for standards. So, you know, as an example, we're going through our SOC 2 audit right now, which is something that is table stakes for a lot of enterprises out there. There weren't any companies that were SOC 2 audited 5 years ago, and now there are, right? So there's another layer of sort of safety that all, you know, across different verticals, right, in cybersecurity and financial controls and financial auditing that are emerging, that make it easier and safer for companies to be able to participate in this kind of environment.
Yeah, I noticed. I read that I think your most recent integration was with, I don't know, it was like that was QuickBooks, which is a, you know, major provider out there, right? A lot of people will be working with QuickBooks on the accounting side of things. That was quite interesting. You mentioned earlier the word self-custody.
Yes.
I'm not completely familiar what that is. So I thought I'd just come back to you and say, what if you could explain what self-custody is? Maybe it's a US, I'm not sure if it's US led or if it's not, but why is this recommended in particular for crypto?
Yeah, sure. So it's you know, there's a old saying from like when Bitcoin first came around, where if it's not your keys, not your crypto, right? So one of the things that we value, at least for Web3 natives, is being able to actually hold your own assets. So in the United States, when you own a stock, right, really you own a claim to a claim to a claim to a claim on a stock. And all the stock actually sits with this entity called DTCC that nobody's ever heard of, right? But they're like the sort of Federal Reserve of equities, moving stocks around on a ledger, right? So with crypto, you have the ability to actually have it yourself. And no one else, right, has a claim to that because it's in your wallet. You can verify that it's in your wallet.
It's a bit like having gold again, really, but putting it under your mattress, except this time you've got it on your browser. Yeah. So with crypto, the standard is sort of you're keeping it under your proverbial mattress, but you're keeping it in your web browser or a hardware wallet or something like that. But many people do choose to custody their crypto on exchanges, which has a lot of, you know, sort of like pros to it, but also, you know, some cons as well, depending on your sort of risk tolerance and all that good stuff. Okay, so just so that I'm clear, so something that would be a hosted one would be something like Binance or that kind of thing would be where they is that the same thing, but they're looking after it under their
Yeah.
exchange? Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think you could kind of like think of exchanges analogous to banks, right? They're the ones custodying your crypto, as opposed to if you are holding it in your own wallet, like
I see.
MetaMask or Ledger or something like that.
I see. I see. So someone who's fully immersed in this world of what I would say, next gen, the next move within the world of payroll and payments, and I think it's really interesting. You mentioned a lot about global payments here, and we do know that cross currency exchange can be expensive, can be time consuming. There's fluctuations in the currency market, so things like blockchain can speed that up. But well, we can save costs, so we can reduce. There's lots of benefits here when we really get under the hood of what's available to people if they're able to sort of get their heads around the technology. What do you think are going to be the biggest things that are going to influence the broader acceptance of crypto going forward in a payroll context?
Yeah, so I think that certainly like the thing that we look to the most is demand of workers. So if nobody wants to be getting paid in stable coins or in other cryptocurrencies, like why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah.
We do see an increasing demand, as I mentioned, in younger generations, and then certainly outside of the Western world, where companies are actually more sort of digital money first. So places in sub-Saharan Africa where sort of like digital wallets on their phones are like the main mode of sort of like money movement,
Yeah.
or in East Asia, where payrolls actually direct deposited onto like debit cards at each pay period. Those are very interesting places where you have a population of people that is actually sort of a little bit further ahead of the curve in terms of digital transformation. And so we think about it from a jurisdiction perspective, certainly from a generational working perspective, like, what are the sort of trends and appetites there? Certainly we have to think about the emerging like regulatory sort of like changes that occur in each market where certainly Europe, I think, is actually like a little bit further ahead of the curve of the United States in terms of like rational regulatory frameworks to help companies operating in this industry or adjacent to this industry figure out how to do it compliantly while also protecting consumers. So keeping an eye on that. But there's also, that on the technology side, there's so much innovation happening so quickly. There's a lot of really fun things that we can think about doing and that we've been experimenting with at Franklin, one of which is something that we call streaming payments. So it's the ability to pay your workers, pretty close to in real time,
Yeah,
which
nice.
which is intriguing, certainly for like venture-backed startups that don't have this sort of like timing of cash flow issue. They may have like a large treasury that they're paying their staff with anyway. It doesn't matter if it happens 2 weeks from now
Yeah.
or in real time. That's kind of an attractive way to bring on like top talent. So we're trying to find the right balance of cool, innovative tech things that we can do, along with what do the people want, what is in vogue right now, and how do we make sure that we do it in a compliant manner.
Yeah, well, listen, it's exciting. I think to be using just that vocabulary in the world of payroll is a step forward from where we have been. I think it's great. Payroll can be dynamic, it can be technically advanced, it can be innovative, and I think some of the services you are providing at Franklin absolutely show that. Before we open the vault, Megan, I wonder if you could just explain to the listeners a little bit more about what Franklin do, who you are, what a customer may look like if there's someone listening to this that suddenly discovers they've got a big crypto asset on their register and maybe they want to get involved.
Yeah, for sure. So Franklin, as you mentioned before, we're a hybrid fiat and crypto payroll software. You can sign up online at our website, hellofranklin.co. We work with a bunch of different kinds of companies. We work with venture-backed startups where we're their first payroll solution that they ever decide to onboard. In that case, we'll help them set up their back office, setting up their accounting software, all that good stuff. We also work with consulting firms that maybe are accepting stablecoins as a form of payment. But we also just work with small, medium-sized businesses that are just looking for a more efficient, cheaper, faster payroll solution. So, if you're paying your team, we can help you out.
Super. And it's global, not just US, which is really important
Global.
just to make that distinction as well, for sure. Fantastic. Well, it's been a really really good whistle-stop tour into the world of crypto. I'm hoping, I find it absolutely fascinating. I hope my listeners have done too. And of course, there'll be all the contact details for hellofranklin.co will be in the show notes, along with their Twitter and their LinkedIn page as well. Before we jump into that though, 3 questions in the payroll vault. First question is this: one piece of advice you'd give to someone working in payroll right now?
So I think that the thing that I felt when I was working as a staff accountant was a little bit of a sense of boredom, where a lot of times working in accounting, you're going through the same cycles pretty regularly: monthly close, quarterly production of financial statements, annual audit, that kind of thing. There's a lot of innovation that the accounting industry generally, and payroll industry in particular, need. We all see a lot of the inefficiencies that exist, and it just takes like a step forward for people who have an idea to try and make it better. So I think, like, don't settle into your sort of normal, regular habits. Think about how to make it better. And that's how we move forward together as a society. And that's what I'm really excited about. Take the chance, do something innovative, try and fix a problem out there. Don't just, accept the norms that you're used to.
What great advice. Well, it sounds to me like something you did yourself. Anyway, I think you mentioned you were an equities desk at the start of the pandemic, and here we are now revolutionizing the world of payroll and crypto payments. So anything can happen. And actually, it's great advice. It really is, because a lot of payroll professionals streamline their operations so efficiently, actually, that payroll can run really seamlessly if they want it to. But that doesn't mean that's where the job can stop. That's where they can get their head around the blockchain, get their head around crypto payments, really look to develop what else is out there, because you could then be the first mover in your operation to really bring in this kind of technology on board if it works for your organization. So I think it's great advice. Number 2, if you had the power of foresight and could change the entire payroll industry with one action or one improvement, what would that action or improvement be?
Instant settlement time. I think that there's so many large intermediaries, or payroll companies in general, make so much money off the sort of backs of small, medium-sized businesses by holding cash for longer than they need to. And instant settlement in cash and equities and other kinds of assets, that is like the thing that I would change about our financial system generally.
Very nice. Excellent. And last but not least, if payroll was a song or a movie, what song or movie would it be, and why?
I have been waiting to be asked this question for so long.
Everyone's waiting for this one. I know, isn't it?
Okay. Have you ever seen the movie The Accountant?
I have seen the movie. That's Ben Affleck, isn't it? Ben Affleck? Yes.
Yes, Ben Affleck, Anna Kendrick. I think it would be that movie where you have this sort of like big whiteboard full of like, numbers and sort of calculations trying to figure out what's going where and why. I think that sums up payroll pretty well.
Amazing. And we've thrown the ball up in the air, then you've cracked it out of the park. Fantastic. Listen, Megan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Payroll Podcast today. Of course, for those that want to find out more, you can go to hellofranklin.co. That link will be in the show notes. The Twitter link is twitter.com/Franklin Payroll, or you can find them on LinkedIn as well. Look for Franklin-Payroll to find their company page. I will also put Megan's LinkedIn profile in there as well if you want to connect directly to find out more. Of course, if you are a payroll leader as well, listening to this podcast, you need support with a payroll-related vacancy. We're not just in the UK. We do support clients in the US and into Europe. So please do get in touch with either myself or any of my wonderful team. Our link will also be in the show notes, which is jgarecruitment.com. Just leaves me to say one more final thank you to Megan for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast to talk about how you can pay your employees, and not just cash, but also crypto. It's been fantastic. Thank you, Megan.